Hey, welcome everybody. How's everybody doing today? Good. I see some thumbs up. Thanks for that, Nicole. I love a good thumbs up. Oh, we got Weeping's got a thumbs up. Mark's got thumbs ups. Those are all good signs. Awesome. Okay, I think we got everybody onboarded from the waiting room. So I guess that means that we are live. So welcome. Thanks for coming, everybody. Today we are going to chat about how to sell to farmers, and we have not one, not two, but three Saskatchewan entrepreneurs and farmers that are going to come share some knowledge with you today. So I'd like to welcome Chris Nykolaishen, Chris Paterson, and Doyle Wiebe, who are going to be the panelists today. And in terms of how this is structured, we're going to try to keep it loose because while I did grow up in rural Alberta, I don't know the right questions to ask, and you folks do. You're in the thick of it as you are working in this space and selling to farmers. So the more audience interaction we have, the more questions that you pose to these folks and leverage their expertise as entrepreneurs and as farmers and people that work in the space, the better. So you can hit the reactions button on the bottom of your screen to raise your hand if you want to interject. You can come off mute and just start blurting stuff out in a gap in the conversation, or you can write them in the chat and I'm happy to read them out and moderate as well. So please ask lots of questions, have some fun, make some jokes if you're into that kind of thing, and it should be a fun hour. And with that being said, I'll start with the intro. So first up, I'm not going to butcher them by doing a big intro myself, so I'm just going to kick it off to Mr. Doyle Wiebe, who is going to introduce himself and share a little bit about him.
Okay, thanks, Neil. And I'll do this quick screen share thing that helps to do that, I think. So
While Doyle's getting set up here. Oh, perfect.
Yeah, we got that.
Yeah, absolutely. I can see the basic screen there.
And yeah, do the other magic thing to get it to show full screen here properly. There. All right. Okay, so you're seeing what I'm seeing, I think.
Yeah, looks great.
Agtech Summit. Sorry, I messed it up to start when I modified it. So just Agtech Summit. Knew something was wrong. Agritechnica is a big show in Europe, but yeah. So that's just a drone shot of my farm, or the farm that Jesse grew up on as well. Most of you have met Jesse, and you've seen me a little bit here and there. We formed prior to getting involved too much in TNT. We formed this family office, as it's called in some circles. We grow capital consulting, and it's more the capital right now than the consulting, as Jesse ends up spending most of his time with the TNT role. So, but we are actively involved in trying to further our interests in angel investing and help it where we can as either as informal advisors or in more formal roles. So I guess the main aspect that I come at it from when I've been in retailing, I've been in wholesaling, I've been a farmer most of my life as well, and so I see it from all the different angles. And when it comes to the farming population, the farm population of owners and managers, the biggest single thing is that you can't consider them to be a homogenous kind of group. First of all, there's lots of different demands because of size and technologies that might be on the farm, but there really is a wide gap from one end to the other, as wide as the population is of consumers, for example, in any consumer market. You just don't. People are not going to be attracted to certain things for various reasons, so I've been frustrated at times as a farmer having somebody try to sell me something that I could almost have told them flat out in the first minute, no, it just doesn't something I fit. But they keep hammering away, and it doesn't change my mind because that's just not where I'm at, and so on. So it's I hate to see people waste their time at times, and yet finding out what the ideal customer profile is, as it's called here, the ICP, because every farmer also has different issues. the product or service you're trying to sell will try to solve a problem for some farmers, but I think most importantly, you need to see how and to try to really resonate with them how the new product, service, technology it will affect them in some way, shape, or form that will then find a way to say it's a benefit. I mean, whether it's dollars or whether it's in the case of some technologies, it's just a matter of being able to save some time or some stresses and strains with better information. That can be just as important as seeing some extra yield or some other cost reduction or so on. But something I learned many years ago in the early computer age was the difference between data and information. If all you're going to supply is data, for many farmers, that's not going to be very useful because they need information. Because the difference is that information, you can make decisions from it. Data is just a bunch of facts and figures. They have to be in a way that assembled in a way that the manager, the owner, whoever it is making decisions, can have something that helps make those decisions. Then I just brought up this old, I'm sure many of you have seen this, or all of you, the classic technology adoption curve, and the farm population is just to kind of to strengthen my earlier comment about the vast differences among the population. It's a very similar to any population of consumers of some product. There's going to be your innovators that will lap it up quickly, and you got to find where they'll find those people in a community. This I use this kind of more just facetiously in some ways, because the leaders of the community, the innovators of the community, aren't necessarily at Coffee Row either. Most often they're not. Coffee Row, as it's euphemistically called, is a place where, as we say, we solve all the problems of the world in an hour every day. I can say it's not necessarily where the leaders are, but that's the place to find out maybe who the leaders are by asking them who's the innovator, who's the guy in the neighborhood that will often take on a new product and try it, because everybody else wants to see some neighbor try the product if they've heard about it and see if it actually works. I'm more of the early adopter style. Well, I'll also wait for somebody in the neighborhood or another place that I can meet to talk about it later as to, well, how did that work for you? You know, because we know we can't all make all the mistakes ourselves. So we have to learn from other people's mistakes as well. But we also want to usually move forward a bit. And at some point, that early adoption and the early majority of that curve will start to realize that these guys are doing better than I am, and then they'll take it on even because of peer pressure, even though they don't necessarily understand the technology. So I think that was the main message I wanted to key in on, and where I'm coming from then with my farmer hat on, and from the times that I've done some retailing and done wholesaling and see through that wholesaling see what the retailers were doing with the product, how they were getting it to be adopted or incorporated into certain farms. But you'll never get them all for sure, just like any other product. But I don't know, Chris, if you want to say anything more directly to these comments. Chris Nykolaishen there, one of their farmer investor colleague, we've shared this spotlight, if you will, on this TNT circle for the last year and a half or so. So it's been interesting comparing our own thoughts on similar topics. So with that's just a air shot of the farm as it is today, or almost today. But it's been a good run for me, and we'll wait to see what else is talked about on this topic today. We'll stop sharing here.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Doyle. And once you're done sharing, why don't you take another minute and just sort of walk through your experience as like I think Jesse, who is his son, and he's also on the call here, and he's our Saskatchewan lead as well. Often calls you one of the OG Agtech founders from a company that you started in the '80s, I believe. Do you want to walk through your your history as a farmer and entrepreneur in the ag tech space?
Right, you did want me to introduce myself a little bit better. Sorry, got carried away with myself a little too quickly. But yeah, back when when they were called microcomputers, before they were called desktops, was part of one of the first groups to really focus on some software in agriculture for the purposes of converting paperwork and so on. In this case, was accounting and other uses in the financial field. And that has translated into what most farmers would be familiar with, whether they use it or not. They'll be familiar with it today, being sold by Farm Credit Corporation as Ag Expert. That was the first iteration of that software, was designed in about 1979, I think, and it's come a long way since then. So then I was in the wholesale fertilizer business for a while, particular product that was a niche product that worked with retailers around the province a bit. And I've done a few other bits of private investing on some quasi-ag ventures, I guess, along the way. But yeah, the farm has grown from that picture that's behind my head now, was just before I was born. And the only building left on that picture is the house. We're pretty proud of it, and that's why that kept that picture. But it's evolved from a 3/4 of a section, or even half a section, I guess it was, by that first owner when my father parents moved here to now it's with a partner where I'm in a transitional joint venture mode where it's just over 6,000 acres now. So it's a straight grain farm. It used to be mixed and all that. So that helps introduce me.
Perfect. Thanks, Doyle. That's a great overview and helps set the stage. So with that being said, Chris Paterson, you have you're unmuted already. So I'm going to kick it over to you next to introduce yourself and sort of maybe while you're introducing yourself, just to help set some context, kind of like Doyle did, chat about what, like, in the context of the discussion today, what you're considering a farmer when we talk about how to sell to farmers.
Sure. So I live in Calgary, Alberta. I'm currently wearing a number of hats. I've been an investor in the ag tech space for about 10 years now, as an angel investor, and then more recently have become a partner in the Tallgrass Venture Fund. So we're focused on seed stage agri-food investing. And previous to that, I've done a lot of things over the years, but this kind of brings it home. I think I've realized that mostly what I've been doing over my whole career is learning the art and the science of how to sell to farmers. And in fact, my very first job out of university was doing exactly that. I got hired by BASF to create a new type of position in the company. My role was to run around and talk to about the 30 of their best accounts in Saskatchewan, and just learn what these guys like and what they don't like, and what has worked successfully in terms of landing sales with these top farmers. And anyways, since then, I've opened a new ag retail and learned, right in the trenches how to sell to not just the best farmers, but you had to sell all farmers. And there was a lot of learnings there. I've worked with a startup in the fertilizer world, and that was mostly in the US. But the art there was the retailers were saying, hey, we already got enough products. We don't need a new product. So we had to unseat an incumbent or get our SKU added to their catalog. And so that was very much about pull through. We had to work with the farmers directly on a trial basis, and then work with the local consulting agronomists and start to pull that product through the retail. Because once there's a demand, once there's an order in place, then they don't want to lose the order. But if you're coming from the top down, that was the thing. So we moved. I was a partner in the AgriTrend company, and we had to learn how to sell consulting services to farmers, and that was a whole different thing than selling a jug or a bag of something. And then that evolved into a big data platform. So we had to learn how to sell a digital product to farms, and then we exited with that company. It's now called Trimble Ag Solutions, and I moved into the world of Bayer to lead their digital platform there. It was originally called Bayer Digital Farming. We ultimately branded it as Zarvio. Through the acquisition of Monsanto, we ended up moving Zarvio over to BASF, and it was about 8 months, I think, ago when I left BASF and joined Tallgrass Ventures. So what was neat there was it was a very different type of strategy. We were selling not data and not even information, but outcomes. So instead of selling you a jug of something, we would want to sell you a weed-free field or a disease-free field as the outcome. And it left us flexible on how to provide that outcome. Could have been a pesticide, could have been a see and spray version of pesticide, could have been a laser beam or whatever. But that was the strategy. There was to get the outcomes envisioned and let us decide how to best supply the outcome. So lots of different types of farms and lots of different types of people, companies that were trying to sell to those farms. So just in preparation for this, I realized these have kind of one common theme here is everything I've done, since early on was about how to do the best job and sell to farms. And I think there's lots of unique things about selling to farms compared to any other industry. And if you think about who farms are, it's I'm thinking broad acre agriculture in the prairies. It's very capital intensive. It's a seasonal business. There's a lot of nuances around that. You only get one crack at the bat every year, and only maybe 30 or 40 cracks at the bat all in your whole career. So that person also has to put up with volatile input markets, volatile grain markets. And there's a lot of different things. They wear a lot of hats. Like the farmer you're talking to in a lot of cases is the CEO, the CFO, the best welder, the mechanic, and the logistics guy, and the marketing guy, and everything else, right? So he's probably really good at one or two of those things. He's probably not the greatest at a whole bunch of those other things, but he's doing them anyway, right? So profiling who you're talking to in terms of what they love to do, what they're better than anybody else at, is a big goal when you're trying to sell to a farmer. And there's lots of motivators. So Doyle covered some of them. Like it might be money, it might be ROI, it might be profit. Those are the easy ones. And but what I've learned is there's probably a lot of other things, like does it remove the hassle? There's a lot of pride involved in, is this the right thing to be doing? Can I be proud that I did this? And, a lot of times it's, they want to be different. I want differentiation and a different approach than all the other neighbors. So that can be a motivator. And there's just a lot of things that might be the motivator. So I would say in the end, you're dealing with a person. People are very different. Know that person. And most importantly, know the problem, like live that problem that you're trying to solve. You're there to solve a problem, and the problem might be I need to differentiate. The problem might be I need to make more money. The problem might be I can't afford another disaster. The problem might be I'm just too busy and I need to make my life simple. But know the problem you're trying to solve and learn it better and deeper than any of your competitors. And you might have a competitor, but as an incumbent that you got to unseat, but you might also be dealing with white space where you're trying to create a whole new product category, and you might approach things very differently in that case. But anyways, that's kind of my background. lots to talk about. I could probably go on all day about this, but I'll see if Chris has some different angles here. So
Perfect. Thanks, Chris. Yeah, with that being said, our third panelist is Chris Nykolaishen, and I'll let you introduce yourself before I mess it up.
All right. So Chris Nykolaishen, my background started as a John Deere dealer. Our family started Nykolaishen Farm Equipment, or my great-grandfather started Nykolaishen Farm Equipment in 1926. It was passed along to my grandpa, then to my father, and then to I guess myself and my two older brothers. We exited that dealership in 2017. We had 2 locations, and we were fairly successful. In our last year operating, or last 2 years operating, we got awards for largest market share in Canada for large ag. So we like to say that we kind of left the business on a high note. And since 1999, we've been farming as well, and we aggressively grew our farm over the years to what it is now, which is a 36,000 acre grain farm. And I guess just recently, I've been with TNT for just over a year now. This is my 4th summit, and I met Jesse by chance, and since then it's kind of been a match made in angel heaven.
Awesome. Well, thanks everybody. And I wrote this in the chat here too, but yeah, please, as you can see, we got entrepreneurs, farmers, investors there. These 3 folks are covering a wealth of experience across like all those buckets. And I know you all fall into that too. So feel free to leverage their expertise. Again, you don't want to just hear me asking them questions all the time. I want to hear from you. And with that being said, we have one question that's already popped up, and it has to deal with sort of culture. And Doyle already talked about this. So Jonas is asking, for those for those who have immigrated to Canada, are there culture shock elements that they need to consider when selling to farmers? Are there this probably goes back to like the coffee slide that Doyle had, but I'd be interested to hear if Chris and Chris, if you guys want to tackle this one first, and then we'll get Doyle to weigh in at the end.
yeah, I've got a little experience in this, from both sides, like immigrant farmers moving here to become farmers in Western Canada, and also people that are working in the industry and that may not be from here or whatever. I think probably the biggest thing is yeah, there are a lot of different things about the way we farm, and the level of risk and the way that the agribusiness works and everything. So I'm a big fan of helping onboard these people and help describe some of the nuances of our industry. And I just remember when we had a dairy farm. We sold our dairy farm, and it came with a pretty big chunk of land, and we sold it to some people from Holland. And the first thing they did was sell a whole bunch of the land, and we just couldn't figure that out. We're going, geez, no Saskatchewan farm boy would ever want to be selling land unless it's time to exit. Like, don't they want to buy more land? And they just said, oh, we don't. That's way too much land for a dairy farm, And I think years later, they wanted to buy more land because they needed more feed. They needed more place to put their manure, and it was a good asset class and everything else. But where they came from in Holland, you just didn't need a lot of land, So that was one little example. But things have changed a lot too on the people coming into this industry to work. I think that there was a stigmatism about diversity, basically sexual diversity or ethnic diversity or whatever. I think today that's changed a lot. I see a lot of ethnic diversity in agriculture. I see a lot of sexual diversity in agriculture, and even the most backwoods kind of farmer is probably used to talking to a female salesperson now, or somebody that moved here from Asia or something like that. So that's one thing that I've seen in my career, that it was a very white male dominated industry before, hard thing to break into for other people. But I would say today, looking at a lot of the companies, there's as many, if not more, women, and there's a range of cultural diversity in most companies now. So it's as a farmer, they've come to accept that. I don't, there's probably some examples you can say where that's not the case, but it's becoming rare to hear those stories.
So thanks, Chris. Chris or Doyle, do you have anything to add to that?
I would agree with pretty much everything Chris said. I think as long as you know, like Chris has mentioned, it's you know, not like it was say 20 years ago. And as long as you know what you're selling and your product can bring value to a farmer, you know, you'll get the time of day to pitch your company, your idea, or your product.
Yeah.
Awesome. Doyle, do you want to wait?
Yeah,
Do you have anything to add to these ones, or do you want me to move on to the next
just
one?
really good points. I just thinking back, I had the pleasure, if you will, or the good fortune, I should say, better word, I think, that when I went to university, I was essentially alongside then the first wave of women in agriculture, and it was first wave of really big retailing products to agriculture too. But before that, there wasn't that many inputs and that many companies, so on. But that I guess really helped me better understand that the expertise that was there and the wave in the society about that. But I'm really glad you mentioned it, Chris, about the diversity that's there, and there was a time when it wasn't, for sure. And I give credit to some of those that really had to endure, people of my father's generation that just would not deal with people of much diverse backgrounds and so on, and that made it very difficult for them. So it is easier now, I think.
I'll add one point too, is that when we talk about diversity, it could be geographical diversity, or it could be also urban versus rural. So a lot of people in agriculture now did not grow up on farms, and that's something that was rare 20 years ago. And the people who are in the agronomy program at the university are more so from urban backgrounds than they are from coming from a farm. That's totally changed. So I think when a salesperson is coming to a farm to sell something and they've got that urban background, you know, there's a learning curve there. Or if they're coming from a foreign land, there's a learning curve there. There might be language barriers, accents, all these kind of things. So those are factors for sure. I'm saying there's strengths in that as well. So there are challenges, but I've managed a lot of sales teams in the past, and the strongest sales teams I had were the ones that had the most diversity. You would get unique ideas and unique approaches, and here's the way we did it. Where, you know, in the country where I grew up on, and that's a tactic that hasn't been seen in this market, and it's a tactic that actually worked, you know. So anyways, yeah, use it. It is a challenge, but also use it as a strength.
Great insight there, Chris. All right, and Nicole's asking a question in terms of like a sales process. So we're talking about how to sell to farmers, and she's asking, do you have any recommendations on how to find and make the initial connections to small to medium-sized operators? So maybe kick this one over to Doyle. I feel like you've done this a few times in your life, so this is a great one for you to start with.
Well, I guess that's go back to my slide about showing the guys having coffee. I think can be the easiest way. Sure, farm shows, trade shows are always the way to try and get a name and an address and a follow-up phone number. But you're going to get average guys sitting around a coffee table in a small town, and from there you can, I think, springboard to finding out which ones of those might even have some desire to talk to you after coffee, or they'll know somebody to give you the name of, and a neighbor or whatever, or a friend in a different community, and just to really get real with those people. And as Chris also alluded to now about the urban part, yeah, I've seen some Agtech ventures in the TNT process now the last couple of years that didn't make it past the top 20, or for sure not past the top 10, because the problem they were trying to solve was more in their minds than it was real. It was a nice idea on paper as a problem. Oh yeah, and here's the technology to solve that problem, but well, not enough farmers would see that as a problem to solve, and so you really had to stop them in their tracks and say, not that there couldn't be another angle to it, but you're approaching it in the wrong way, and it's you can't just come at it from the lab bench or the computer and say, yeah, this is. I'm sure Chris Paterson, I think you might be able to allude to how the consulting part was a real tough sell, because it's how do you connect the dots on what that would mean to a farm operator in the long run, because it doesn't add directly to production, that doesn't take away time necessarily, but how do you value decisions made in a bit better way too? It's and so those kind of services are really a tough sell.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, and I'd like to also, Chris, I'll get you to jump on the sort of next part of that. So like with agriculture being so regionally spread out, and if you're like a new entrepreneur starting and trying to get your first customer, how do you what's the best way that you sort of segment that market to figure out where what whether you should go for coffee in Smiley, Saskatchewan or in Grand Prairie, Alberta? How do you how would you, if you were a new or entrepreneur, figure out where you need to be for those coffee meetings like Doyle was to talk to those actual operators and founders and farmers?
Yeah, I'll give you there's two things I'd like to talk to you about that, but one of them is we in the days of Agtech did a lot of data gathering on who we worked with. We knew the equipment they had, how much land they had, the crop rotations, how they tended to how they marketed their grain, and we did actual personality profiling as well. And we ran a lot of exercises to say, who would our ideal customer be? And we could figure that out, but where would we go to find another one of these ideal customers? Our assumptions were all 100% wrong. We thought we knew what that ideal customer would look like, and as we got delving into the data, we thought, well, okay, our in the digital realm, our customer is going to be younger, and that was false. There was no really strong correlation in the age, and that was a shock to all of us. We thought, oh, it's going to be a bigger farmer. They got more stuff to manage, more details to manage. They want to be more organized, whatever. That was a shock to us as well. There was no correlation in the size of farm. That was our ideal customer. So we had to dig deep, and what we learned was, in the end, it was personality profile. Didn't matter if you were 27 or 57, you had this need to be managing at a higher level. You had higher goals, whether that's yield goals or less recs. You had a goal, you had a problem to solve. So then we learned that, okay, there's a certain demographic of personality profile that we're actually searching for. And where would we go to find those kind of people? And we learned that it was not in the coffee shop. It was people who despised the coffee shop and they would go to different events, more professional events. They would travel a long ways, and often they didn't have peers in their own community. So that was an insight that was very valuable for us. And the other thing was, how do you get your first few customers? So that brought to mind a memory when I was starting the ag retail. I was new to the community, new to that business, and my only thought of what to do was hop in a truck and go visit farmers. And I did go to the coffee shop. I did go to the saloon. I went to all those things to try and make relationships with farmers. Drove into probably 200 yards just cold calling, and my hit ratio was very, very low, because I've learned a lot about the sales process and the psychology of selling since. But what I learned that was really valuable in that exercise was just ask for referrals. It was that simple. Like, I'm not here to sell you anything today, but we've got a new business here. Here's what we're providing. And what I'm searching for is, who do you think would be a good one for me to go visit? So you wouldn't be in that first visit asking for that guy's business, but you'd be asking for a referral. And most of the time they'd start rattling off 4 or 5 names. Going, oh, that guy over there, he's kind of frustrated with the competitor right now. And that guy over there, he always shops his business around. And that guy over there, he doesn't pay his bills, but he'll buy anything from anybody. You heard all this stuff. And pretty soon, you know, in a short amount of time, you got the intel on who you should be going to talk to. And in most cases, the stuff that we've learned turned out to be very true stuff on who we should be dealing with in that market and who is an opportunity and who we should stay away from. So
we're having a lot of the same challenges that you're talking about, where we've have our first bunch of customers, but the farmers are all so different. There's doesn't appear to be a correlation between the size or who they are or anything like that. And we have asked for referrals, but they seem to be like such soul, like independent kind of people. So even though they're happy with us getting the referrals, doesn't seem to really be there either. And then, for instance, if we want to go, like we kind of market on both sides, both to the farmers and then also to consumers. And like we take their products to urban places. So if we want to go expand out to other urban centers, like I'm trying to figure out how we would do that to go to other urban centers as well. So like what you're talking about is exactly the like exactly where we're at, which is the struggle you went through.
I think what Chris was talking about there with the the customer profile kind of coincides perfectly with one of Doyle's slides in his initial presentation about the adoption curve. If you're an innovative company, you need to find innovative farmers, and there are a few of them out there. So you're gonna get a lot of no's before you get a yes. And asking for referrals is the right thing to do, but some guys may not be comfortable sharing or may not know who to refer you to. When we were operating the dealership, we tell our salespeople all the time, you're gonna, and this is with the single customer, not a broad spectrum of customers, but it's gonna take 7 no's before you get to yes. So just get used to hearing no and keep pushing.
Yeah, and I always say it's really good stuff to ask why. And if you're going to make it a goal to know, the problem you're trying to solve better than anybody else in the market, you can only learn it that way by hearing from a whole bunch of people who told you no. And so don't let no be the end. Follow it up with why. Like, what would need to be true for this to be a good idea? You might be 50% of the way there, or maybe even 70% of the way there, but you need to get 100% of the way there. And there might be something simple that you can do to make that difference. And so always follow up no with why and what would need to be true. And there's a lot you'll learn about what you're deficient in, or maybe it's not on your end, maybe it's on their end, maybe the timing is wrong. Maybe they're cash strapped this year. Maybe they've just bought something else. So if you don't ask why, you're not going to learn much. And it's your goal should not be to sell something that day every time. Your goal should be to learn that problem better than anybody else. So, and then the sales will come. So.
Absolutely. Great question, Nicole, and good insights, folks. While we're talking, there's another question or two in the chat here that we'll get to. But while we're talking about sort of the initial sales process, the ag business, whether it be like seeding, harvesting, or calving, is super seasonal. I think I can't remember who alluded to that already. What are some of the sales strategies that you have to like take advantage of the seasonality of those different aspects, or some of the challenges that you face because of the seasonal aspects of the industry? And maybe Doyle, it's been a little while since you. I'll kick it to Doyle and then to Chris Nykolaishen, because I bet he's got some great insights on that too.
Sorry, Neil, I was just glancing at the chat here a little bit to see what was in there, so I didn't catch your question.
Oh yeah. So in terms of seasonality, as somebody selling to farmers, and how do you deal with that or take advantage of the seasonality in the industry?
Well, interesting. You mentioned, I just was a thought I had while some other conversation was happening a few minutes ago, is that I too often, as I interact with a lot of urban people, I've done a lot of tours and things, and the one classic question that came from a very bright young guy, part of a group of excelling students from across the country, was, "Oh, what do you do in the off season?" It was like, well, farmers get all, well, what do you mean off season? Well, I kind of knew what he means off season, because they think, it seems like the conventional wisdom is, if I'm a grain farmer, I plant the seed in May and spray it, maybe, if I spray, and then I harvest it in September, and the rest of the year is off. Well, there's just so many other business things, and if I start articulating that, it's in the off season of production that you have to get ready for the next season of production. And it's in the off season of production that you do your shopping, you do your educating, you do your deals, and you do your buying in a lot of cases of things you need to use. But I say that because I've had experiences too where we have a local, mostly, well, I guess it's not independent much anymore, but for many years there was an independent retailer of inputs near me. It was the closest one I had. A supplier I had anyway, and they would often be approached by different innovative product sources, whether it was for inputs or whether it was some other technology, and whether it was competing at all, or whether they just saw it as an advantage to have as part of a meeting so that they could attract farmers with an agenda. They would often bring in representatives from other companies that just to meet the people, and that's another source of information. So the seasonality of it is that farmers are very used to spending the time when they have it after harvest and before seeding, and if they aren't hauling grain, or if they aren't having a holiday once in a while, they will attend meetings, or groups, or be available individually. And so the seasonality is very important. But most importantly, I think the person has to recognize what the busy parts of the operation are and when they are, so that you're not trying to steal time away when they are really busy, and that you fully are showing that you recognize that, and maybe find a way of, if your product is very key to that particular season of the operation, it may be very advantageous to be at the farm, to see them operating and say, gee, if you had my product here, for example, you could be doing this. They could be kind of recognize how it fits in a little easier than trying to remember in January how things were in August exactly. But I think that's where seasonality, and I'm talking grain farming, which is more obvious season, but other operations have certain seasons as well in different ways.
Thanks, Doyle. That's a great response. And Chris, I imagine with in sort of the dealership that you and your family have been in for so long, you probably saw lots of seasonality there. Do you have any advice on how to manage that from a sales standpoint?
Well, I mean, to add to what Doyle said, yeah, the off season no longer exists for farmers. It's operating season, and then just operating season. But from the dealership standpoint, it's just all about knowing your customer and knowing all your customers very well. You can get CRM software that helps you with this, but we knew from a dealership standpoint that this customer buys new equipment every year. This customer buys new equipment every second year. This customer will only buy this guy's trades. This customer only buys tractors in December to February. He doesn't buy sprayers until June. You kind of create a profile of your customers and know when they purchase, what they like to purchase, and even whose equipment they like to purchase from, and just develop a good sales funnel that's it's always developing, because some farmers buy a combine in August, some farmers buy their combines in February, and it's just all about knowing buying patterns and purchasing patterns and the the needs of your customers.
Awesome, thanks, Chris. Okay, and I got one more sort of really sales focused question, then we'll get to Jonas has a question about pain points. But I like in my limited view, we see lots of founders come in and try to establish their product through using channel sales partners in lots of industries, but you see it in ag tech for sure. So what are the pros and cons of using channel sales partners and things to watch out for as you're trying to obviously increase your like sales strategy and leverage in terms of channel sales?
Well, with channel partners, you've got it's you're looking at two levels of sales, right? You have to sell the pull through at the farmer level, and you also have to sell. You have to get permission to sell through that channel partner, and so you have to learn what problems they're trying to solve, and you have to maybe unseat an incumbent. How do you do that? You have to know what's not working right about that relationship that they've already got. So there's a lot more complexity to that, but they are trying to be better. They are trying to grow their revenue. They are trying to solve new problems for their farmer as well. So they're hungry all the time to be better. And that's it can be intimidating if you don't know what they're trying to solve. So figure that out. That's the goal. Open-ended questions. Don't get into pitch mode very soon until you've asked all those open-ended questions and learned what they're trying to solve, because they don't want to just do the same thing as they're already doing. They want to do something better than that. So they're open to hearing new ideas. But if you aren't asking, if you're there pitching, you might be pitching the very wrong thing that they're not trying to solve. So channel partners are very important. At some point, it's very expensive to not use channel partners and go direct to your end user. That's the most expensive sales model there is. It can be done today, maybe a little more efficiently through digital marketplaces and stuff like that. And there are some in agriculture, some alternative channels through the digital marketplace. And there's sometimes there's farmer dealers that'll set up as an alternative network to the established channel that you're thinking of. So there's some new options opening up. And I think that you really have to work out like how expensive like your customer acquisition cost is what you really need to dial into there. How expensive is it going to go to start doing cold calling on farms and start to profile some farms that you can sell to, and then land that sale and manage that product after you sell them. That's a very high overhead way to go. It might be the best way to go depending on your product, but you have to think about that customer acquisition cost, and then go from there.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. Doyle or Chris, do you have any additional thoughts you want to share about using channel partners for growing your sales?
Go ahead, Chris.
I think Chris nailed it. I really don't have anything to add to that.
I might add one more thing that I should have said. It's just like this is what I think I learned best in working with the big companies, where they've thought for 100 years about this and formalized their process. But value creation is different than value capture. So you're there to solve a problem, and you might be doing that very well. But how do you capture that value? And when you say value capture, there's multiple people that are going to share in that, right? So the farmer is getting a problem solved. That's value capture for the farmer. The retailer might be making margin, and maybe differentiation, and there's a couple other things there. But how, and as the manufacturer or the founder, you got to capture some value and make a margin on that. So there's multiple parties, and value capture is a very different discussion than value creation. And that's what I see a lot of startups do, is they focus so much on the value creation, and they say, we'll figure out value capture later on. But in terms of which channel you choose, that can, even if it's harder and more awkward, you got to figure out ultimately to capture our value, this is what we got to do. And that's sometimes a hard effort and a hard decision.
Absolutely. Thanks, Chris.
Neil, I'll just dovetail into one of the other comments you mentioned that you saw in the chat as well about pain points, and it reflects back to what Chris mentioned earlier about the strengths that farmers have, the long laundry list of skills most farmers need to have, but none of them are good at all of them, and mostly are just good at a couple of them. And so the pain points come from partly that, what you're good at. And so what you're not good at can either cause a pain point or just something you just don't even want to talk about, not even improve. But the other big part of it is what is the technology regime you're at now, and even a modern operation, you call it modern, might still have the newest grain bins and sensors for this or that, but not buy a new combine for every 5 years, for example. But because their priority has been on that part of the operation, and so there's going to be, but it's been evolving. It depends on how that farm came to the status it's at now. I mean, we still have a lot of small bins on our farm because it just doesn't make sense to kind of chuck them out the door when they're not cheap they're not worthless, but to build big new ones is a big capital cost. So we're stuck with a pain point right now. A little bit is that we are moving the augers a lot during harvest time with 2 combines now that can, if we have a good crop, we're pushing out a lot of bushels in a day, as just one little example. And so it depends on the recent experience of that operator too. What things caused him stress, what thing caused him grief, as to how he'll react to, he or she will react to some new innovation that might solve a problem that they previously wouldn't have recognized as a problem, and now it can be so.
Yeah, absolutely, Doyle, and great segue into Jonas's question about what are the major pain points, right? So if I'm hearing you right, and this goes back to what Chris is saying about the value and the capital, like the upfront capital costs are some big considerations for in your grain bin instance. What are some of the other pain points that are in farming, and what are some of the big challenges that you see out there in the farming space right now? And I'll open this up maybe to Chris Nykolaishen here to kick that off, and I'm sure that Doyle and Chris will have some additional thoughts on it.
I think the biggest pain points are the things that you can't control, like the cost of your inputs and the weather and things like that. Things that are more so under person control. Finding good help is really hard. There's always a need for employees on each farm and capable employees as well. I guess it's not really a one size fits all sort of answer. I mean, like we mentioned before, some farmers are stronger at one thing than the other. So, you're not going to have the same pain points from farmer A to farmer B, and it could be within the same segment of farming, like small grain farming or pulse farming, and then going to cattle, and it's really tough to find a single or even a few single answers to that question.
Totally. I think you listed a few good ones off there already, Chris. What about Doyle and Chris? Do you guys have any thoughts you want to share for Jonas's question about some of the major pain points you see?
Well, I think there's a long list, and it depends. It's going to be a unique list for each one. Each individual will have different pain points. So yeah, there is the obvious ones are there's a labor shortage. There's especially a shortage of skilled labor, and there's a big challenge on how to retain skilled labor, because if they're good at what they do, they're a big target for everybody else, whether it's the agribusiness that's or the neighboring farm or whatever. So that's a big pain point for all farms all over the world. Regulatory risk is one where they don't know from year to year, is this product that I'm learning how to use going to still be on the market? There's depending on where you're from, urban creep or urban crawl or whatever is a big problem, where there's now acreages around your fields and you're out there trying to spray and there's a windy day. It's lots of challenges, and I'm just let the maid trying to come in here. Anyways, I think that's why I'm excited about some of the solutions that are coming out that answer some of the pain points on labor, like things like robotics and automation and sensors and stuff. Answer some of that. There's a big threat from regulatory, like emissions reduction, and some of the active ingredients are being banned and stuff like that. So there's a great category there right now on opening up for biologics and emission reduction products, and So for every pain point, that's an opportunity, and uncovering the pain point is going to be unique for each farmer. So again, ask the open-ended questions, because it's not going to be the same formula for everybody.
Absolutely, thanks. And we're coming up on the top of the hour. Doyle, do you want to close it up and any last thoughts about this subject?
Oh, I'm not very good at last words. Give it to somebody else.
All right. Well, with that being said, I think that wraps it up here today. So first of all, thanks to everybody on the call for joining us. Thanks for the great questions. I was worried I was going to run out, but y'all kept it going, and this was great. And special thanks to Chris and Doyle for making time for this today, and for Gloria, our Winnipeg lead, and for Jesse, who's not on here yet, but he was also hanging out here. So yeah, huge thanks to everybody. This was a ton of fun.